we are going to have a very simple format here. First, we would like to invite each of the speakers to give like 3-4 minutes of their thoughts about this topic of ASEAN connectivity, to take stock of where we are right now. Now, should there be any like urgent clarification question or urgent question, you may step up to ask those questions right after the speaker, 1 or 2 maximum, so that then we can allow other speakers to continue to share their thoughts on this topic. And then subsequently, we would have a few other questions to dwell deeper into the respective area of ASEAN connectivity. Since we talk about the physical connectivity, we talk about the institutional connectivity, and also the people-to-people connectivity. So in this regard, there are several aspects that will actually have profound impact on how we look at ASEAN, and of course, within as well as in relation to our partners from Japan, from Hong Kong, from India, and so forth. All right. And we also welcome during that time to have the floor to actively ask questions or even maybe present your quick comment. All right. So with that, I would like to follow the sequence. You have the program book there. You know, if I were to make the brief introduction or introduction of each and every one of the speakers, it's going to take up 1.5 hours. So I would like to ask you to refer to the profile of our speakers, which is actually contained in our program information, so that we could save some time and give the session to each of those according to the list here. And we shall then start with the first speaker, who's on my right here, His Excellency Dr. Sok Sipana, who's the co-chairman of the ASEAN Economic Club, a senior advisor to the Royal Government of Cambodia, as well as the chairman of the Board of Directors, ASEAN Vision Institute. Dr. Sipana, please.
Thank you, Dato Wei, my good friend. I think we see each other so many times already, I can call you my friend. I think the topic of this morning, it's quite interesting, and interesting in the sense that it's an ASEAN, but we have a good friend from Japan. So I thought it would be good to set the stage a bit with the fact that we have one country from North Asia, which gave me the opportunity to set the stage by referring to ASEP. Because I think we talk about connectivity, we talk about centrality, all that thing, but you got to have one overarching, I would say, agenda to pull together, to bind people together. And I think I cannot think of anything else more relevant than ASEP. 11 years ago when it was launched in Cambodia, when Cambodia had the chairmanship, and it happened that 10 years later, one full cycle of ASEAN chairmanship, it entered into force last year when Cambodia chaired the ASEAN for the 3rd time. And what we had is 15 countries. In fact, had India decided to stay on, we would have 16 countries. But having said that, India have a special privilege in the agreement that you can come back anytime. You don't have to wait 18 months to be, to come back. So we keep our hope high that someday, when your internal politics will settle down, then you decide to join the ASEP. But ASEP is, in fact, representative of all the issue of connectivity. You look, I'm about to publish a book, sent to the printer already. It's 555 pages of the main agreement and 14,000 annex. I didn't read all the annex, but I did read the 550 page. And I find all the elements to serve as the basis of connectivity. You have the trade of good, which of course connect everything. If we don't have a good port, how can you connect? If you don't have a good, airport, how do we connect? So this all air, sea, lane connectivity is there. The soft connectivity, you're talking, we have the e-commerce. We have a good chapter on e-commerce. Investment in the service sector, it's pretty much every sector is available. So I see in this ASEP a real opportunity to come together. Nonetheless, it's 1/3 of the world GDP. Let's face it, it's 1/3 of the world market. And of course, it's the only mega free trade that has all ASEAN country there. Unlike the CPTPP, because some of us are in, some of us are not. But what drive, is ASEAN. In fact, if you look at it, it's not China-driven, it's not Japanese-driven, but to be fair, the idea started with Japan. Like some 20 years ago. So you got to give credit to Caesar, and here Caesar got the credit. But I would say, moving forward for the next 10 years, I believe that ASEAN, and ASEP will be the game changer for our region. We're 1 year into the agreement enter into effect. We start to feel the companies start to look at the rule of origin. They start to diversify the supply source. They start to move the company to country where they can produce an ASEP product. And I would say for the next 8 or 9 years, you will see the source of growth will be coming from ASEP. Thank you.
Wow. That is really great message to start with. ASEP is the game changer. There are many things that are actually outlined in ASEP that will actually facilitate comprehensive connectivity. Thank you for that. We should like to move on to our second speaker, Dr. Kunihiko Hirabayashi, who's the Secretary General of ASEAN Japan Center. Dr. Hirabayashi, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have 3 words. Very simply describe why and where we should go. People, trust, and co-creation. I'm very proud to be here. I'm a minority. Actually, I'm a heart surgeon. I'm not involved in any economic cooperation, but do believe people is a fundamentally important for connectivity. And this year marks the milestone Japan-ASEAN cooperation 50 years. We reflect this 50 years cooperation. What is the key element? It is absolutely people-centered collaboration. Not just the people-to-people connectivity, but I'm a heart surgeon. That is my heart-to-heart connectivity. That's the key element of the connectivity. This is the cornerstone. The second element, trust. Trust-based collaboration, partnership can overcome many challenges. Dispute, unnegotiable issues, so many conflicts. If we believe in principle and trust them, that's the fundamental cornerstone for rebuild and stronger connection. How trust come? Of course, transparency, but not giving up any difficult situation. We should continue to discuss even the difficult situation. That is why trust is the second most important element to enhance connectivity. The third is co-creation. Like current challenges, climate change, environmental degeneration, one single entity, one single country cannot solve. That is why working together to find solution, actionable solution, like Kadin mentioned, togetherness and also inclusivity is non-negotiable practices. So how we can do so is the answer is co-create the common interest, common area of threat. That is why people, trust, co-creation, the three keywords to keep our dynamic vision to be relevant in the 50 years. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Hirabayashi. You actually touched on really the heart of the issue, that is the heart. The people, the trust, and the co-creation. And that also seems to suggest that it's a very centered around Asian values, because trust is such a key word. Even in the word of Stephen Covey, trust is speed. Right? Trust can solve a lot of issues. Thank you for bringing this topic up. All right. So with that, we'd like to move on to also our North Asia friend and partner, Mr. Sean Yuan Lee, who is the Director General of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. That's based in Jakarta. That's why you are wearing batik. Welcome, Mr. Lee. Your sharing, please.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Wei. I'm very happy to be here to meet with our ASEAN friend, and my office is responsible for all the ASEAN matters. That's why I'm here. Let me start from Hong Kong, because we are not member of ASEAN. However, we are very close to most countries in ASEAN. We enjoy traveling to each other places. We enjoy shopping in each other places. Enjoy the food. However, indeed, our relationship is much closer than that. Hong Kong is a free economy. We are pro-business. We are capitalist. We have the full authorization from Beijing. While being part of China, we have our separate membership in the World Trade Organization. We have our own custom region. So we have our own trade and economic policies. So given that we have been very sophisticatedly developed as a logistical hub and a financial center, in last year, we, for the first time, has become world number 6 merchandise goods trading entity. And indeed, to achieve that, I must accredit to ASEAN, because ASEAN has been our number 2 trading partners for the last 12 years. Last year, it was an all-time high. Our trade volume is $165 billion US, which actually helped us a lot in galvanizing, consolidating our reputation and our status as a World Trade Center. Since we are doing so well and closely with ASEAN, so we also have an ASEAN Hong Kong-China Free Trade Agreement, which was signed in 2017. And we see that as a very good opportunity to enhance our relationship. And indeed, the result is very apparent. Despite we are having COVID for the last 3 years, passenger flow is quite limited and restricted. However, our trade volume, no matter in service or in goods, has significant increase. For the last 5 or 7 years, our annualized increase in trade volume between Hong Kong and ASEAN has been consistently over 5%. And over the last 5 years, since the signing of the Free Trade Agreement, our total increase in goods trade and also the total increase in the investment amount has been over 40%. And for us, Hong Kong, we are not just providing a platform for trading. We've also tried to provide more contribution. So through the Free Trade Agreement I just mentioned, we also have an economic and technology cooperation program, in which Hong Kong has contributed more than $3 million US in helping various measures like capacity building, like further the trading relationship with ASEAN countries. And so far, we have approved more than 20 projects submitted by Vietnam, Laos, Philippines, Thailand, and also the ASEAN Secretariat. So we hope that we will continue to proceed with our relationship, and we will further galvanize our relationship, and we hope that we will be even closer partners. And from us in Hong Kong, we stand ready to contribute through our financial services strength, our professional services, logistical support, transportation support, in the hope that we can also continue contribution to the global trade arena. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Mr. Lee. You have given a very unique perspective here because you have highlighted that Hong Kong, while practicing a free economy with the blessing of Beijing, is also a separate member of WTO, and there is this ASEAN Hong Kong free trade arrangement, and therefore it has been the impetus of the growth in terms of trade investment across from Hong Kong and also ASEAN. And you have also highlighted that there is this very significant but yet lesser known aspect, which is a economic and technology cooperation, of which you are funding the capacity building, exchange of technology, and so forth. I think it looks like this is an area that we could actually explore a bit more later on. Right? Thank you for your sharing. We'd like to move on to, within ASEAN now, Mr. Udet Suvarnavong, who is the president of the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Lao PDR. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Wei. I represent one of the least economy of ASEAN from Laos, but I've been involved with ASEAN and founder of ASEAN MPAC since 2002. And my vision here is that since 2015, the ASEAN government has put a vision for the ASEAN Connectivity 2025. And they have set up to achieve a seamless and comprehensive and connected and integrated ASEAN that will promote the competitiveness of our country and bring inclusiveness and giving more sense of connectivity within our people. And they have set up 5 goals. First is the sustainable infrastructure. So all ASEAN countries need to improve their infrastructure. I think the same as Dr. Sopipana said for the not only ASEAN but the global integration. Digital transformation was already put there in the roadmap and the innovation. And of course, connectivity involves trade, seamless logistics, improving regulations between borders, and the people mobility. So that is already put by the government since 2015. But today, if you look at the statistics, trade within ASEAN intertrade is still very low, 25%, less than 25%. And the people movement within ASEAN is also very low. Trade between ASEAN countries and other part of the world has been a first target for many countries. And therefore, when trade within ASEAN is not big, not large enough, intra-investment between ASEAN is also low. So this is what we are actually. And challenge is also that there are also other challenges like the rehabilitation from the COVID pandemic, the climate change, as you said, the geographical tension. But what is very challenging is, this is my thought, personal thought, that how ASEAN is organized to implement all those plans, those ideas, and those strategy is not really effective, efficient. It's taking too long. For the private sector, for us, I'm an entrepreneur, it's taking too long. Implementation of the custom system, ASEAN custom system, the Form D for cross-border, not the NTB, NTM, the mutual recognition for the non-goods, and all of this is taking too time. So I think that it is time now for us to rethink ASEAN, because of the pandemic has also given us new thought on what to do. The globalization 2.0, like I like the intervention of the governor yesterday. Should not let big conglomerate to what you call to govern us. We need to be part of their supply chain, and also to build up our supply chain which is strong on the resource and human capital. So that is, we need to change everything in ASEAN, and we need to change the organization institution of ASEAN to move faster and more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Odette. It's very interesting that you actually have pointed out something which seems to be more of a shortcoming, recognizing that even though ASEAN has been coming together for quite some time, however, if you look at infrastructure, there are plenty of room to improve. And you also talk about the low intra-ASEAN trade. There are significant numbers, there are growth, however, in your view, it is still relatively low. So I think it's a very important point for us to ponder upon. The other one is also low level of people-to-people connectivity. So if we talk about ASEAN integration, I think this point really have to be dwelt into and find a greater means for us to achieve that people-to-people connectivity. And you mentioned one thing of which I think it requires all of us policymakers to come together. That is about implementing the ASEAN vision, because there are many so-called good plans that has been put forth. However, when it comes to implementation, ranging from custom clearance and all this, it has taken very long time before things can actually be implemented, right? And lastly, you have touched on the globalization 2.0, of which it seems to be the new hope for ASEAN, because this is where the SMEs coming to the world rather than being led by the large multinational companies, and also the supply chain around this region, right? Thank you for highlighting this. And we'd like to move on to our next speaker. That will give us a different perspective, which is about ASEAN and also India, all right? Datuk Ramesh Kodamal, who is the co-chair of the ASEAN India Business Council based in Malaysia. Yes,
thank
Datuk
you,
Ramesh.
Good morning to all of you. First and foremost, I would like to thank KSI for organizing this event. Tan Sri Michael Yu, Tan Sri Majid, Dato Sri Iqbal who are present here today. I think this is a very good initiative which they take every year to see the viewpoints of a lot of you all who are present here today, to see how ASEAN can actually move forward. Today's discussion on connectivity. Connectivity can only be done with good relationship. That is the core word of connectivity. If ASEAN wants to have connectivity, they must have good relationship with all the ASEAN states to move forward. What I see, ASEAN is good in planning, but it's very slow in implementing. This is the fact. We must accept facts in life. We must be fearless when we bring out our points, when we speak. This morning, when I switched on the TV, and hearing the news from Australia, it was said that yesterday the leaders had a discussion, and now Singapore and Malaysia are trying to work to finish up the work on the causeway and infrastructure between Singapore and Malaysia. What does that clearly prove to us? We have been neighbors, cordial neighbors, for so long, and yet we have taken such a long time to do this. So the point here is, in ASEAN, we work together, we hold hands together, we party together, but yet, like just now Mr. Udit pointed out, it takes very long for us to implement things. We have a lot of trade agreements within ASEAN, within the region, but if we want some halal approval for food being exported from Malaysia to Indonesia or Brunei, it takes a long time to get approval whether it can be done. So what are we looking at? Are we really moving closely together and enhancing connectivity, or it is going to still take us time? Looking at the world's geopolitics today, we all understand it, we all see it, but some of us remain silent because on our platforms, we have the support of some countries and we do not have the support of others. So when we are trying to enhance ourselves, we don't remain neutral, we have to support different levels. So how would ASEAN come with a formula that we all have the same viewpoint, work on the same platform, and see that our thinking is totally alike before we move forward? I think this is very important in connectivity and relationship. So these are the things, what I see from my perspective on the ASEAN side. And I would also like to comment on Dato' Sok, who's a close friend of mine from Cambodia, speaking of RCEP. Yes, RCEP is definitely something which you all within ASEAN are going to benefit. And he mentioned about India. We gave India 18 months to join back and come back if they want to come into RCEP. But let's understand the problems or the viewpoints of India. India wants to do everything, but India doesn't want to do everything fast because there were reasons for it. They are today the world's largest population. Today, India has got the 5th largest reserves in the world. India has got the youngest growing economy, younger people who are there. They are heading forward in digitization and fintech. So what is India looking at? India at present is afraid. If it opens up a market, it might disturb its internal infrastructure where their manufacturing is concerned. Everyone comes and dumps in, and their industries will actually have a problem. So it cannot speak out openly on what they feel, but we must understand and do our research on what they're feeling. But coming back to India, I can assure you they're moving, and they're moving at a tandem where everyone is caught by surprise. It needs another 15 to 20 years to reach in a certain place where we can say that India is a world economic power, a powerhouse, which we can see the data which we are getting, the information which we are getting, being the 3rd largest GDP by 2025 or 2026. So all these are there. But I always said earlier, because I've been in business for the last 50 years, and I've seen the trend moving. Earlier when we were talking of importing goods, we were only talking in the 50s and 60s, importing goods from US and UK. Under the Commonwealth countries, UK was a good platform to import goods because we trusted India quality. And then as we went on, we saw Japan moving into exports. And then in the beginning, we did not trust on Japanese goods. We felt, why buy Japanese goods? But later, with all their TVs and electronic things, Japan was a net exporter in the world. While Japan was moving, we saw Korea moving. While Korea was moving, we saw Taiwan moving. While Taiwan was moving, we saw ASEAN moving. Japanese investment, Korean investments all came around here. Then all of a sudden from 80s, China started building up its portfolio for export. China had sufficient in the domestic market by 2000, 2001. And then it started moving towards exports. And today we call China the world's factory. So this is a cycle, and it happens. And I have seen it happening, and I assure you, within the next 10 or 15 years, India will be a powerhouse for export. Because they've got the numbers, they've got the know-how, they have got the domestic market, and once they're sufficient with the domestic market, and then you can see India coming up in the market to export. So these are the things which we can realize. What I'm trying to stress out a point here is that ASEAN must have a balanced relationship with its foreign neighbors, which is very important. We should not be seeing siding one side, not the other side. So we are like Dr. Iqbal mentioned last night. We have on our right or left China and India. We have the borders of ASEAN covering by this country. We should work as a weighing scale, having both of us in left and right, and balancing them. By doing so, we have to have a very cordial internal ASEAN relationship within ourselves. So we understand the subject matter on how to link both sides and balance them and negotiate with the world what ASEAN needs. ASEAN needs everything to grow further. We are a growing population. We are touching 700 million. In time to come, within 15, 20 years, we might reach to 750, 800 million. We are a growing population. We need the support from outside as well as inside to balance our growth. So my message here is, we are growing, we are working, we need to balance ourselves, we need to have a cordial relationship, we have to set up a plan of understanding within ourselves, and we should not delay. When we take a decision, we should be fast in implementing. This is very important for us to take us forward. With that, thank you.
Wow, Dato' Ramesh. So you have put forth something unique. First of all, you talk about having to balance the good relationship, left and right. Not only that, you also talk about the need to synchronize the timing, because ASEAN also has taken its time. ASEAN is not without the issues, because ASEAN has taken a long time to implement whatever, the approval process and harmonization process. And likewise, the relationship with India, there's a need to understand there's a timing to everything. So India needs to take their time in order to be prepared. And of course, there are always pros and cons, whether or not there'll be greater integration and fusion of the economy at the early stage or the later stage. So therefore, it calls for us to lend the understanding, maintain good relationship. That I think will be also important food for thought for all of us. All right. Thank you. Now we are going to switch back to within ASEAN. The next speaker is our Ambassador Delia Albert, who was the former secretary, the Minister of the Foreign Affairs Philippines, and former ambassador and senior policy advisor of Suchip Gores Villayo and Co. Philippines. Ambassador, please.
This is working. Good morning. Yesterday, thank you, Michael, for reminding me how old I am. Perhaps that gives me a reason to look back into why ASEAN, what ASEAN, and how ASEAN. I was very fortunate to be part of the team that participated in the Bangkok Declaration some 56 years ago. And since then, I've been following the progress in ASEAN, meeting the challenges, and of course, I'm very happy to see how dedicated and tireless Michael has been in doing his share in promoting ASEAN, not only among the ASEAN member countries, but also with our dialogue partners. But perhaps we have a saying in the Philippines, one who does not look back to the past cannot get to the future. Therefore, I'd like to remind everybody how ASEAN came about. We had very visionary leaders. As early as before the 1967, we had 3 leaders meeting on the phone, on the golf course, talking about how do we get our region together. The Malaysian, Tun Abdul Razak, the Philippine Foreign Minister Ramos, and the Thai Foreign Minister Tanat Koman. They formed an informal group called ASA, Association of Southeast Asia. Then they realized we should have the big country, the big brother with us, and the Philippines suggested we should get Indonesia on board. So you had Mafilindo, Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia. They were exciting times in our history. We had just come from our colonial past. We had just come from World War II. And we thought that the future really was depending so much on the regional cooperation that was necessary to keep moving forward. I would like to comment, perhaps at this point, having been in the inner circle, to the initiative of Tanat Koman. Tanat Koman, to my mind, is the father of ASEAN. It was Tanat Koman who said, hey, you guys, 3 and 3, perhaps we should make 3 and 3, get together and make it 4, which would mean Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. 1965, of course, Singapore became independent. And there's a wonderful letter from Tanat Koman saying we should invite Singapore on board, and Singapore was very keen to be part of the original 5. It is an exciting story because it is a story of 5 wonderful visionary men whose friendship revolved around one thing: golf. I think golf is the glue in the birth of ASEAN. I can remember fully well when I was senior official of ASEAN that every meeting of ASEAN senior officials should dedicate one day to solve bilateral problems on the golf course. And to avoid any problem with our home offices, we do not call it Golf Day, we call it Documentation Day. It was a day when our lesser officers would work on the report and we senior officials would solve all the issues at the golf course. And I think, in a way, this has evolved very well. And there was what we call the ASEAN way of solving our bilateral issues. That we agree to play together, but at the same time, be open to each other without getting into a conflict situation. I think that spirit has continued to this day. Now, why ASEAN? I think that from the early days, the idea of a community was looming in the minds of our leaders. Community that started with letter C, because we were hesitating to commit ourselves politically or even economically. So letter C, ASEAN Community, took 25 years to be recognized in our vocabulary, which came about in 1992 when AFTA was born. I think one should really commend our leaders who took a very slow but sure way of getting there to make sure that we are working on a steady ground. I think when we decided in Singapore to form AFTA, of course there were reservations here and there. I can tell you stories, but how we would explain a vote by the way a leader would open or close his double-breasted suit. When the double-breasted suit was open, it was yes to AFTA. When it was closed, it was no to AFTA. But these are all wonderful stories that really built up a sense of being comfortable with each other, that the letter C of community came about. We were not even allowed to use it in integration was not a word in our vocabulary until 1992. So you can imagine how we tried to avoid whatever would perhaps appear like a conflicting position, but to move ahead and get together and finally agree to a letter C of community. And the first manifestation was, to me, to my mind at least, was the ASEAN Free Trade Area. Now, community building today seems to be a major preoccupation of the ASEAN Economic Community, which is rightfully so. Because after all, if you look at the Bangkok Declaration, it was talking about the people of ASEAN moving together in peace and security. So, why? That was the why. Now, what? Of course, again, I would say that all the pillars that came about form the what of ASEAN. The political security, the economic community and economic cooperation, and of course, the socio-cultural community. Now, if I look back and see how well we have performed, I think we've done quite well, albeit rather slowly in our economic community building. Our political and security is doing quite well. We are able to discuss with each other whatever sensitive issues there are in terms of boundaries, in terms of all the challenges, even global issues that would come about. After integration, I would say that the idea of the kind of integration process came about with connectivity. Connectivity, which was very high also, if you look back at the ASEAN vision, it's equivalent to what we are talking about. To arrive to that ASEAN vision, a major tool would be ASEAN connectivity. However, I would still like to think that people in ASEAN should be more engaged and more concerned and more dedicated in building that community. Many surveys have been made. The Institute of Southeast Asian Studies has done a very recent study of 2022, how well the people of ASEAN really know each other. Sadly, statistics are not very bright, which means that there has been a disconnect between the first two pillars and the third pillar in community building in ASEAN. And I'd like to quote a very, very interesting quotation from one of our diplomatic colleagues, Ambassador Desker from Singapore, who said, community in ASEAN exists only among policymakers, political leaders, academics, many of you are here, journalists, some of you here, and those who participate in ASEAN-related activities, like all of us here. By contrast, people living in Southeast Asia, the idea of a community with shared values towards a shared destiny remains to be a wish to be fulfilled. To me, that is the greatest challenge that ASEAN faces today, and I look forward to more discussions on how connectivity will really make us get to that letter C, big letter C of ASEAN Community. Thank you.
Whoa. Ambassador Delia, you're the history come alive. Thank you for going through, the various, what I call stages of ASEAN, from what is ASEAN, why ASEAN come into being, and where we could be heading, especially in the area of charting the shared values and destiny in the future. You also have touched on one very peculiar, I would use the word like practice within ASEAN. That's, maybe we could call it ASEAN ways, of which the leaders come together, they play golf, they solve a lot of issues at the golf course, while the officers use that as a documentation day, right, to kind of trash out a lot of documents, just alongside at the golf course. So that seems to be the ASEAN way. And also the very informal but yet very clear respect of the individual members by having the double-breasted jacket to be the means of casting the vote. So that, again, is a very unique ASEAN way. Subtle, respectful, and yet it is effective in moving ASEAN to the next step. Thank you for sharing this very core part of why, what, and how. Right. Thank you. And next, we would like to move on to our another learned speaker, Dr. Kirida Bapichit, who is the director of TDRI, Economic Intelligence Service, Thailand Development Research Institute. Dr. Kirida, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wei, and good morning, everyone. I think as an economist on this panel, I'd like to share my views on how I think the global economy and also the mega trends that are coming together will really affect ASEAN. And I'd like to really underline that being individual countries in ASEAN, we will not survive this, what I call the perfect storm that's coming. So what I'd like to do in my 2 minutes or 3 minutes that I have is that I'd like to outline some of the issues of the mega trends that I think would form the perfect storm, and how I think ASEAN maybe could connect together better to weather this storm. But of course, in the eye of every storm, it's, there's a calmness there. So there are opportunities in this storm as well. So if ASEAN could come together and to connect together better, I think we could weather the storm and at the same time take advantage of the opportunity in the eye of the storm as well. So I think there are actually 3 mega trends that we will all have to face, and as individual countries, we will never make it if we are on our own. One is definitely what everybody has mentioned is the geopolitical tensions that are coming, right? We're torn, between the U.S. and its allies and China and its allies, right? I just have to be frank right here, right? They're coming to us, let alone the political issues, but even on the economic issues. Some countries are being wooed by China through their investments. Some are being wooed by the U.S. and their allies, by their investments. So is ASEAN going to be divided, into 2 camps? Which, by the way, these camps will be divided more and more in the future. And the supply chains are going to be reconfigured. So are we going to be divided into one side being the supply chain for China and the other side being the supply chain for the US? I don't think we want to do that, right? So I think being together, being focused on the fact that we are a big, resilient supply chain region of the world, I think that will make us, a very attractive region for both sides to want to invest in us and not make them, feel that, we are divided and we can be, taken advantage of because we're, on their side or or not on their side. So I think this is one thing that I would like to highlight, which is the geopolitical tension. The second mega trend that definitely would affect all of us here is the fact that, we are having climate change issues. And I think this is really big. Climate change issue is not an individual country issue, right? When there's forest fire in Indonesia, it affects all the way to Malaysia, to Singapore, to Thailand. And especially when there are forest fires in Cambodia, Thailand is mostly affected, right? And these come with climate change, let alone, food security. That will come along with the climate change issues as well. If we don't collaborate to mitigate and to adapt to the climate change issues, to go low carbon, I don't think we will survive very long and we will not be sustainable in the future. So I think this is another big area that, ASEAN connectivity, will be important for our survival in the future as well. And of course, there are many opportunities that come along, with the low carbon economy as well. There's so many, new products, right? Plant-based proteins, electrical vehicles. So all these, can, be a driver for ASEAN growth as well if we actually come together and not regard each other as being competitors, but rather being partners in, tackling, this storm that's coming, towards us. The last big mega trend that I think will really affect us in the future is the digitalization that's coming about. Of course, we talk a lot about the benefits of digitalization, right? E-commerce, telehealth, tele-education. These are all good, but don't forget that it's also very disruptive, right? AI, which is coming through digitalization, is disrupting so many jobs. Just the chat GPT that has come about has already disrupted jobs of software writers, of those who are, junior legal or accounting professionals, right? Because ChatGPT can do all that for you. So again, here, how will ASEAN, position itself, in this storm of digital disruption, right? How do we improve our skills and our technology together in order to weather this storm? I don't think any one country can do that. We don't have enough resources in just one country. But if we pool our resources together, I think, this kind of connectivity will make us go forward. And I just want to reflect the fact that I know implementation has been slow. While I appreciate all the progress that has been made, implementation has been slow. So I think my final point on implementation is that if we can identify these key issues that will make us survive through this perfect storm, and we make them as priority, and we say, well, let's, collaborate on these 5 issues first, right? And of course, these 5 issues will, of course, encompass physical connectivity, digital connectivity, people connectivity, and, also institutional connectivity as well. So maybe we have the priorities, make them, something that we want to work together, but they will have spillover effects to all the pillars of connectivity that we want in the future as well. So thank you. These are the comments I'd like to make.
Dr. Kirita, thank you for bringing the elephant back to the room. So you said, okay, it was a big elephant that has gone away. So right now, here it is. You turn on the light, right? Thank you so much. The perfect storm that you talk about, the geopolitical tension. Well, that could tear the ASEAN apart. So I think we would need to actually find a common response to that, so that our, the economic tendencies, the supply chain could be kept intact, and then we want to actually be able to address the needs of the different interests out there. And climate change is threatening all of us. And you talk about digitalization, that brings the disruption. Of course, the AI as an example, and of course, it is also borderless. And lastly, you talk about, being slow in the implementation has to be recognized, but I think we can set priorities in facing this perfect storm to help us navigate forward. Thank you, Dr. Kirita. Now, we'd like to switch to the big brother of the, ASEAN. You know that ASEAN is also playing host to this year, right? So, Dr. Dionysios Najoko, who is a senior economist of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, area, Indonesia. Yes, Dr. Najoko, please.
Thank you, Dato. Thank you, Dato. So, good morning, everyone. This is very nice, respected panel talking about one of very critical, actually, factors for the community building, as Madam Ambassador mentions. And by the way, Madam Ambassador, you should write a book. Because you should write a book on the history of the 19th.
My book, My ASEAN Story, is coming out as an oral history from the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore. But the book will be launched at the end of this year. So I make sure all your names are around there.
Thank you. I was maybe millennial generation from the perspective of the founders of ASEAN. But to be frank, now I can get more sense on this what's so-called community words in ASEAN. And apparently it has rooted deeply from 1967. Okay, now we are talking about ASEAN connectivity. I guess there are two big points I want to stress here. The first is, as many has expressed great ideas about ASEAN connectivity, but I guess one role, an important role that connectivity is playing, and I guess not many has taken this into account or deeper, is this narrowing development gap role the master plan of ASEAN connectivity is playing. ASEAN, as we know, 10 member states, a lot of varying development level, and in ASEAN we do not leave anyone behind, so we move together, and this is maybe what explains why process has been relatively slow in ASEAN, although it is effective, the way I see it. So, okay, so connectivity, physical, institutional, people to people, all from economic point of view at least, it is proven to be able to make the distributions of wealth more equally. And we know, ASEAN has a lot of different distributions of wealth between countries and within countries as well. There are metropolitan cities, there are secondary cities, and so on and so forth. So from that point of view, actually physical connectivity and people-to-people connectivity are very important, as previous respected panels have, I guess, touched upon. So in terms of physical connectivity, we see the example in Laos when the train network, passing the countries, connecting one side of the country to the other and connecting to China as well, that really make a difference. And it can actually spread the wealth more equally. And coming from archipelagic countries, Indonesia, the Philippines, connectivity in terms of physical connectivity really move wealth, move by moving people, moving businesses, and so on and so forth. Now, the challenge for the future is this. We had pandemic, okay? And two critical, one of the critical factors for physical connectivity in this sense is air transport. We know the air transport business now is still struggling. We have the air transport sector has not really recovered, and one of the impact is this the airfare is still relatively expensive. Up to now, I guess there has not been any sort of creative idea on how, how to recover these sectors. At the same time, as Dr. Kirida mentions, we have digital revolutions. We have online meetings, we have Zooms, which also economically is not so encouraging in terms of air transport recovery. But the point is, that is one of the critical factors. The second is services industries, and if we are talking about making connectivity be useful for welfare distributions, one immediate sector that is important is tourism. Tourism really touches at any level of people, income level, and also really move people from one places to the others. And this is very important. And again, ASEAN has a lot of tourism centers or activities. Okay, so those are, and pandemic also has not really made the sector to fully recover. So this is not a challenge actually for connectivity in the futures or in the near futures. So that's one big point, that connectivity is important for welfare distributions and narrowing development gap between ASEAN countries. The second is listening to the comments made by the previous panelists. I was just thinking that, people constructively criticize that the process in ASEAN is slow. Yes, it is correct, but I believe it is effective. As 1992, AFTA was initiated. 2020, ASEAN has RCEP. 3 decades from moving from AFTA to RCEP, I thought in history that's actually quite quick. Okay, 30 years out of 100 years. That's could be. Look at the European Union sort of evolution span of time. So I guess we need to look at from the perspective, as well as from the degree of the variations in terms of development level between ASEAN members. We have, countries as developed countries and developing countries. So I think we need to give a bit of, leeway for ASEAN there. But the challenge is global dynamism is too quick for ASEAN. Dr. Krida has perfectly pointed out about the geopolitical challenges. Geopolitics, maybe we can solve that diplomatically, although it's quite challenging. But something that we cannot run from, which is digitalization, is artificial intelligence is coming to the door. So all of this is something that we cannot escape. And relative to the ASEAN way, it is too fast for ASEAN. Okay, MPAC, Master Plans of ASEAN Connectivity, was introduced or launched by Vietnam in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, Vietnam chairmanship, right? 2011, 2012, Indonesia and Cambodia kick off the RCEP negotiation. So, in sequence, if you look at that in sequence, if you want to learn something from history, 2009, ASEAN still think, okay, within ASEAN, between countries in ASEAN, connectivity. 2011, ASEAN already think, okay, we have unconsolidated ASEAN +1 FTAs. Too many problems, noodle ball issues, spaghetti ball issues. That's why 2011, Indonesia put on the table the idea of why don't we negotiate, why don't we consolidate this ASEAN +1. ASEAN +1 means ASEAN +6 dialogue partners. So if we, again, if you look at from in sequence, 2009, ASEAN still think within the 10 member states. 2011, ASEAN starts to feel, okay, we need to take into account our broader, greater region, neighbors, which is East Asia. And now we are talking about Indo-Pacifics. It's even a lot greater. So the movement globally within 3 decades is just too fast for ASEAN way. But then, again, if we are looking back within internally ASEAN, I guess the message is ASEAN needs to focus. Okay, the world can change whatever it wants, digitalization, Indo-Pacific, whatever it is, but ASEAN has the merit, has a strong justification, has the reason, strong reasoning for having connected ASEAN through MPAC, Master Plan of ASEAN Connectivity. Therefore, I guess ASEAN should focus on that. Try as much as possible to achieve connected ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dion. Yeah. Well, so you actually put forth an argument. You say that ASEAN actually has progressed and also it is effective with the ASEAN way. Only thing is that the global dynamism and also the kind of digital essentials that you use actually is too fast for ASEAN. So that is actually a kind of interesting argument there. And therefore, that calls for ASEAN to kind of put forth the focus of the connected ASEAN, the connectivity, as your suggestion. All right. So, all right, thank you. And we would like to move on to our last, and perhaps it's also perhaps one of the very learned, very wise speaker, Professor Sutipan Chiratiwan, who is the Executive Director of the ASEAN Studies Center of Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Professor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me thank first the organizers, in particular the Michael and his team, for the kind invitation so I could join so many dear colleagues and friends and also the new faces around this room. Really honor to me to be in this particularly session on connectivity. In fact, the word connectivity itself become the big buzzword, right? The concept, I think, is well defined by, our ASEAN. That's we have a long history that, and I admire very much the Excellency Delia to reiterate the long history back to the ASEAN creation. But this day, as we know, we're looking at the ASEAN Connectivity post-2025 agenda as defined by the summit in Cambodia. So that's something that perhaps this session could help in part to looking forward. But the thing I have in my mind, because it's, if you're looking, what really our common standing, because we seem to express from different angles. So I hope the floor, I'm sure you also have formulated your own view. So this is something that's about the understanding of ASEAN connectivity and what connectivity stands for. And then there also, of course, we know that you mentioned, well, many around the table mentioned, well, that's different from what ASEAN say, what ASEAN plan, and what implementation. There's a big gap in between. And I think it's normal. We are all emerging country. And start with, although we like to do it, we don't have money, right? So we have to find the financing of infrastructure, looking for regional agency like ADB. In fact, if you're looking back, beginning 90s, I remember, that Kirida here, who in Thailand, our Prime Minister, Chai back then said, well, how we like to turn by the end of Berlin Wall, also in our ASEAN, he said, how to turn our neighbor, from the, from the battlefield to the marketplace. So that was pronounced in 1989, right at the end of Berlin Wall. So things have changed so much in between. And by 2010, we stamp out the first master plan. And now 2025, as I said, there's so much progress, I would say, have made quite remarkable progress in between. Not, of course, not without shortcoming, not without the problems that we had. Our colleague from Laos, Kun Udet, mentioned very well. Even the basic fundamental, from cross-border logistic arrangement and all that, we still had to clear all these kind of issues in order to have the better trade, investment, facilitation, people could cross. Even my country, there's if we estimate the logistic cost, it's already at 14% of GDP. We used to be 17, 18 GDP. We bring down over 10 years why we have that kind of ASEAN connectivity. Is down from 18, 19 to not bad, but we still not get the developed country, 7, 8% or even less. So that's why I think it's very important to remind that very first and important for ASEAN Community is, of course, is here to stay to support the ASEAN Community building. And it will be part and parcel of ASEAN regional integration and development all along. That we all said that's very important to look at this important. However, as a colleague from the area also mentioned, that we would like to support. Here we have the center of growth, opportunity, prosperity from our ASEAN building, of our ASEAN connectivity. But still, I would say narrowing development gap mean also narrowing connectivity gap in ASEAN. Singapore, of course, the best city, country, island, but expensive, of course, when it comes to everything now, for living, for a lot of things, but exciting. And you go in between all emerging ASEAN, from Malaysia down to Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. We become, as Governor said yesterday, we become from 16 to number 4th in the world in 2045, right? So that's why the date of 2045. So emerging region necessarily have to have a good connectivity. And that's why I think the connectivity from within is still need to bridging a gap. And that gap is, connectivity gap is important in all aspects. I don't have time to mention about it. I agree very much. And this is something, if you're looking at the pitiful and maybe political conflict in Myanmar, now it's a missing link. Myanmar is a missing link if you're talking about to India. Now we have to change the whole plan. So hopefully this kind of thing is also, we need all to also work together and assist all our neighbors, the fragile, Myanmar, and also some other country maybe need it and need come together in order to not, of course, each country have their own agenda, but then ASEAN agenda should be more important to connecting together. And I have also in mind, this that we need to always say that ASEAN is very open economy and society. We are very open. If you look at the trade for clear, the trade figure is clear. You're talking about the Hong Kong, how much trade with there. And Thailand or ASEAN, overall, now for example, we're talking about rise of China from who mentioned about this. China is just by 2001, by 20th century, very small partner, only 2-3%. Now China is the biggest trading partner of ASEAN. It could become bigger than intra-ASEAN trade. So this is a challenge, So what ASEAN would be like in terms of centrality and all that, because now it's 20% of ASEAN trade, and intra-ASEAN trade is 2025. We're talking about. So this is a challenge. And imagine ASEAN so open and trade more with China than US. The US size is more than 5 times now of size of ASEAN, 23 trillion against 4 trillion perhaps of ASEAN. And ASEAN trade a lot, of course, within North Asia. I agree that ASEAN, we're talking about all these countries, ASEAN, and also outside, of course, we have the EU, we have the US on that. These is all neighboring countries of 15, 16 countries, and together with major partners of the world, we support very much this open economy ASEAN. So how this connectivity, of course, is so important to link all this. We would like to be center of growth, but also not forget that we still like 1/5 or 1/6 of Northeast Asia, and we are the similar size of we have in India, and then Australia, New Zealand, and then all other countries. So this is something very important if we're talking in terms of, to my last point perhaps, and this I agree that the big picture, global emerging trend, I would say I agree with our digital transformation, with the geopolitical rift, rivalry with US and China, and as well as the climate change risk and all the green that we try to work out. I would say this is very much, this is the big trend, and how this big trend going to impact our citizens, because it's all in all, we all said yesterday, by we talking about the village, right? We would like to, what do you call, ASEAN, we call people-centered, people-oriented ASEAN, how to, this connectivity, and also why they've been brushing by the change in the global trend, how this is going to matching or impacting their life and their happiness. I guess it's one thing is quite clear. Post-COVID perception and also the interest of our people will quite change. I think quite change quite tremendously. So I think they learn quite from all things digital. If you don't have digital, we all dead, right? So we stay home, only physical. So this is digital will help. And then we still have the so-called the help from many other countries, the exchange that we have that make ASEAN make such a progress. But I think very important is how this connectivity finally will define the wellness and how ASEAN people happy by the end, because of this not easy, this changing global trend, because I would say it's unpredictable, and this is even like to predict anything far. It's not, taking the latest around the world. We're talking about the ChatGPT and OpenAI. It's all registration. The U.S. Yesterday. President Bush has mentioned something that we need to do something, and this is some of the latest issue. And in EU, perhaps the first bloc try to come up with a kind of regulation toward this. So there are both sides, of course, of opportunity and risk. But then I think it's important to make it clear how all these quite unpredictable and quite in a troubled world that we're moving, that we need to make it fixed and make ASEAN moving forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prof. So you seem to sum up like a lot of points from all these speakers here, because you say that connectivity is really meant, the gap could be solved when there is this closing of gap of development, closing of gap of trade, closing the gap of development, and recognizing that there is also the macro trends that is actually affecting ASEAN, right? Thank you for doing this sort of a summary. And then can I just quickly ask the floor, would you have any question? Just come forward. Yes, please, Dr. Dino.
Great presentation, but I want to ask a question. Every year ASEAN produces a declaration detailing all the functional cooperations, like health, agriculture, trade, investment, and so on. Sorry, thank you. So as we know, every year ASEAN produces a declaration at the leaders level and also at ministerial level. And they usually cover all kinds of cooperation issues on trade, investment, tourism, blah, blah, blah. Just a long list of it, right? And I think it's very hard to read all of them. I just want to ask one simple question. And I think it's very important for us to ask this and answer honestly. Is there one functional cooperation of ASEAN? And when I say ASEAN, not between Indonesia and Singapore, or Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, I'm talking about all 10 ASEAN countries. One functional cooperation that has made a leap, in terms of its content and its impact. I don't know if it's in agriculture or industry, whatever. One obvious case in point is obviously the reduction of tariffs across ASEAN. So that's all 10, right? The visa policy, that's all 10, right? But functional cooperation, right? Is there one that all 10 has cooperated and created huge or significant content and impact, right? Because I think that's how we will measure what is this ASEAN cooperation is all about and how it has benefited the people. So I don't know if any other panel would like to point to one and then give us with an example. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Dino. So may I just ask our panelists to kind of share your thoughts? Is there anyone who want to start first? Yeah, Dr. Wu.
Thanks, Dr. Dino. I think that we have involved in the sector, ASEAN sector under the ASEAN CCI before and ASEAN PAC. And we found the declaration quite good in terms of declaration. The implementation is quite difficult also. It's the same problem. Implementation is still a big challenge. But I think that tourism is one of the sectors that has really brought ASEAN. The elimination of visa between ASEAN, I think it was proposed by the tourism ministers. So that is one. I think tourism has already put ASEAN and the connectivity together, better connectivity. What we are proposing really, we have proposed is to waive the airspace for ASEAN carrier. But no, not yet. But we are fighting, the tourism are fighting for that. So to get more, you see that the increased number of budget airline in all countries has increased due to the lift of the visa and so on. But if we reduce maybe half the airfare to pass the country only, or to land and so on, then we have more connectivity. I think the tourism is one of the sector that has really achieved something.
All right, yes. I think Dr. Sipana would like to add on.
I think too much echo here. Let me have another microphone here. I think I've been covering ASEAN for the last 12 years. I attend pretty much every summit with the Prime Minister. I have to read a lot of documents, but there's one thing that always puzzles me, is that when I read all the report that they give, before we go to the meeting, right? Report after report after report. Sometimes I don't know what it say. It was a listing, I'm sorry about area, it's a listing of meeting after meeting after meeting, They're so good at listing the name, the date, everything. But you try to say, but what the hell you talk about that meeting? I could not get it. So after digesting, God knows how many of these report, you don't know what it's really saying. You read the report of the Secretary General, it's like, I would say it is, when you at the high level, you do not see the micro level. Because a lot of things happening at the micro level, at the technical level, but you do not have access because by default, you can't have access to what's happening with the Ministry of Tourism. You cannot have access to the meeting of the Ministry of Finance. You cannot have access to, unless you make a direct call to them, but it's not possible. So I think this is the issue of ASEAN. It belongs to the few people who are involved, and after the meeting, he go back to his office and that's it. It does not filter to the public. It does not filter enough to the public to make a real impact. And that's why I can assure you, if you do now a survey of the last 10 years of report, declaration, statement, joint statement, whatever, and you will find how many were actually implemented. I'll be very surprised to see. But anyway, that's my 12 year of following summit.
So still on this one functional cooperation, right? Dr. Rabayashi would like to kind of add some points.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with you about tourism, particularly promotion of sustainable tourism. And the sustainable tourism including local economic development, people-to-people's connection, and also respect to their cultures. So very much aligned with what the connectivity talk about. And also there are no rivalry among developing partners. Japan, as Korea, China can promote their traveler go to the sustainable destination. No win and no lose. And also we can spend a lot of time for the comfortable destination to feel awareness. And also tourism demands a peaceful environment. So it's a prerequisite. Promotion sustainability is automatically go to the peaceful environment. That is why I really want to highlight importance of sustainable tourism. And also the sustainable tourism sector have a lot of women working in front line. So those type of reskilling and upskilling definitely contributes integration of the inclusiveness of the destination. And I really agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have also our Ambassador Delia?
Oh, just two thoughts. If I recall the summit that led to the connectivity roadmap, I remember there were two things that were the main reasons for setting up this connectivity. One is to strengthen integration, definitely. And the second, which was very interesting, is to make that process of integration involve dialogue partners. I thought it was a very interesting aspect to that discussion on setting up the connectivity roadmap. This was repeated, and this is one reason why I think we have strengthened our relations with dialogue partners. In a way, it was also a means to strengthen that integration process through the roadmap of connectivity. Now, you talk about one functional cooperation. I have to tell you something. ASEAN Women Entrepreneurs Network is a terrific network that evolved rather late because the gender agenda in ASEAN was an afterthought. I always say, why did it take so long for ASEAN to recognize that there are women in ASEAN? And I thank Vietnam for having that initiative. and picked up very well by Thailand and the rest. You cannot imagine the interaction that's happening today among women entrepreneurs in ASEAN. I have just come from Dubai, where we had the Global Summit of Women, and ASEAN women were very well represented, and they were in very good conversations with our sisters in the Arab nations, because UAE has a very good project for engaging women entrepreneurs. So for me, and I think this is one area in ASEAN that has been rather missing. If I look at the audience today, there are a handful of women, and you talk about inclusivity, you talk about diversity. I think ASEAN should do more, but I believe that one area that has picked up very well is the AWEN. It has even picked up better than the APEC Women Leaders Network. I think because there is so much to share between and among the 10 member countries. I used to be part of the ASEAN APEC Women Leaders Network, and it was very, very slow. But the ASEAN Women Entrepreneurs is fantastic. I tell you, there should be more of that, because, and another initiative recently, again from Thailand, was to have the private sector engage directly with government through ASEAN associations, which is one way to cascade whatever is happening on the intergovernmental level. And the ASEAN Association, each country now has a chapter, and this is done by whatever group has been agreed upon. And for the Philippines, we have created the ASEAN Society, which is public-private teamwork to help government. After all, ASEAN is an intergovernmental body. But you have to cascade whatever is out there, and I can feel the frustration of all the decisions being made in this and that community meeting. But there has to be a national effort to cascade whatever is happening from the intergovernmental side of ASEAN. Otherwise, it will never reach to where the community really is being built as the ASEAN community, big letter C. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Dion, you'd like to add, maybe, I think in the interest of time, because we are coming close to the end of our session, could you maybe take like 30 seconds, please?
One example that I can think of is national single windows and ASEAN single windows. But okay, so that's the other thing is a lot of reforms in customs actually is ASEAN driven. I mean, this is based on areas engagement with ASEAN. And just one more point. I guess ASEAN needs to do more in its public relations, Madam Ambassadors, because a lot of, the budget airlines, national single windows, ASEAN women entrepreneurs, all are the benefit of ASEAN cooperation, but no one knows. Oh, one more thing. Ibu Mari Pangestu, when she was Minister of Tourism, proposed this, a bit of experiment in terms of movement of professional in tourism sectors. So instead of having hardcore standard and conformance for professionals, she proposed to ASEAN a bit more relaxed sort of type of that one. And it actually allows a lot of movement of professional like chef, all of these professional in tourism. Okay. But yeah, at the time it started in tourism, and that really worked.
Right, thank you, Dr. Dion. I think let's move on to the next question.
Can I have one thing?
Yeah.
Yesterday I met with the ASEAN, new ASEAN Foundation, and they are very preoccupied on building that awareness of ASEAN. So they now have a TikTok program exclusively on ASEAN. So there is TikTok and Instagram, which is reaching out apparently to quite a number of people. So ASEAN goes TikTok.
great. The ASEAN Association, ASEAN Society, ASEAN TikTok, ASEAN Community. I think we are getting there. People-to-people connection. Yes, those three.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask a question or to make a comment. I see the government to government is excellent. Declarations are made year after year. Cascading down to the bottom is having weaknesses. People to people, very little is taking place. But where it is taking place, it is not called ASEAN. This is the sports area. We have the SEA Games that is currently going on. It is SEA Games. Why don't we, from this conclusion of this Leadership and Partnership Forum, make a recommendation that henceforth it should be named ASEAN SEA Games. You still can have the sea in it, but ASEAN SEA Games, people will know that these games is connected. The connectivity that we are talking about is related to ASEAN. That is my recommendation. I hope we adopt it, and with people like Padino, take it up with Delia and Sosipana up to and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato' Sri. Looks like I think sports is a way to connect people, right? ASEAN SEA Game. All right. I think we come to the last leg already. I just would like every panel speaker to take 30 seconds, actually, to describe your vision about the way forward for this ASEAN and beyond connectivity. All right. So again, we're going to start with same sequence. So we will have Dr. Sipana.
Yeah. I believe that, moving forward, it's a long process. ASEAN is not a fast-moving ship, but it's a steady ship. ASEAN way works. We don't have to agree on everything today. Things that we don't agree, we can put for tomorrow. And that's probably the strength of ASEAN. And on that strength, I think as we build brick by brick, block by block, the ASEAN connectivity, the ASEAN economic community, at some point we will make it. I am very hopeful, although a bit impatient, but hopeful. Impatient, but hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you, ASEAN Way. Next, Dr. Hirabayashi.
Thank you very much. I strongly believe ASEAN can overcome three perfect storms. Even the geopolitical tension, climate change, digitalization, disruption, definitely can solve. If ASEAN can achieve, this is the one of the best model for other regions. That is why if ASEAN cannot do it, maybe other regions cannot do it. So ASEAN should be much more ambitious goal is addressing those and perfect storm even they can solve by their centrality agenda. Thank you.
So ASEAN centrality. Thank you. Let's move on to Mr. Lee.
Yes. Yes. Hong Kong has always been a big fan of ASEAN cooperation. And we have applied and we have indicated as the first economy to join the ALPF when they are ready to take on new members 18 months since its initiation, which is July this year. We look forward to be admitted, and so far we have secured the support of all ASEAN member states, and we look forward to have a closer, more intensified and enhanced cooperation. Thank you.
Wow. Hong Kong into ASEAN. Thank you. Mr. Udet.
For me, ASEAN centrality, yes. But we should also develop the sub-regional area because of the history, the culture, and also the potential of connectivity. And those sub-regions are the Mekong region, the BMAGA, and the ITGT, I think. These regions are very cultural connected. they are very historical connected, and also there are potential connectivity for the people. The thing that we forgot about that also, because if the region sub-region are growing, ASEAN is going to grow. And we don't need to wait for everybody to grow. I think the Thailand, Laos, Vietnam need to help each other, Cambodia needs to help each other. And the rest, also the sub-regional. Because government can help, but the people, like Ambassador said, in the statement of the Singapore ambassador, the people don't know, but they need to help each other or need to connect. So that is my last view.
All right, ASEAN help each other. Next, we have Datuk Ramesh.
Thank you. I think ASEAN has grown to a certain level. We have already moved. We can see our problems. We can understand our problems. I think every ASEAN government should have a Minister of ASEAN Affairs. This should in fact help ASEAN to move forward faster. That means the ministry set up in the government for ASEAN Affairs only, so the minister will know where are the problems and how we can take this agenda forward. If all 10 countries can come up with a suggestion of this sort, I think we can take a faster pace in deciding things, moving things, and taking it forward.
Yeah. Whoa, wow. Minister of ASEAN in each country. Thank you. Next, we'd like to invite Ambassador Delia. The way forward. 30 seconds, please.
Way forward, I believe building that, what I always believe in ASEAN as an association of energetic and ambitious nations. And I believe that we should be more inclusive and more respectful of diversity, but maintain that unity in that diversity. Thank you.
Inclusive, embrace diversity, and maintain unity. Thank you. Next, of course, we have Dr. Kirida.
Just briefly, I just want to reiterate again that I think in this post-COVID world, it's ever important than ever that ASEAN integration and connectivity will keep moving us forward. But not only that, actually it will, guarantee our survival. If we don't connect, if we don't integrate, it will be very difficult for us to weather the perfect storm that is coming. Thank you very much.
Connect to survive. That's key message. Thank you. Dr. Dion?
Yeah, thank you. To follow up my earlier argument on focus, maybe I'd like to convey a message to you, Madam Ambassadors, and to Pak Dino, to convey to countries, Indonesia and Philippines, to suggest that there should be a leader, de facto leader for this ASEAN connectivity from now on. Yes, ASEAN every year has its own chair, but over the time, consistent, I guess we need to have a leader for this project, ASEAN projects.
Leader for ASEAN project. Right, thank you. ASEAN connectivity. Okay. And then, yes, last but not the least, Professor Sutipan.
Thank you. I think most importantly, I think is to keep ASEAN connectivity close to the people. That's particularly the younger generation. They're the one who will make it happen, as well as we know. As well as ASEAN rationale or connectivity integration to make sure that this is something that go along each other, for the beginning. If you think about it, ASEAN Community building, 2010, and then we started 2015, beginning 2016. ASEAN Connectivity is also must go along the way that it is, as I said, is part of the community building that you not forget. So involve the young people and the leaders also. Like we had the governor yesterday. This is part of the young politician. They're the one who much more advocate than the older generation. So thank you.
Thank you. So connectivity for the overall well-being of our ASEAN people. All right. So I think with that, we have come to the end of this session. I thought that we have so much of the key messages here. We have learned so much, and certainly we have to take back all these learnings and then do our part, especially to realize this is a big ASEAN vision of us coming together, be connected, and seize the opportunity so that we all could grow and progress together. And I would like to invite everyone to join me to thank all the very learned panel speakers here. Thank you very much.